If you've been looking at the new AQA Paper 1 Question 5 mark scheme for narrative writing, you might have come across this phrase in the top band, distinctive and original narrative perspective. In this video, I'll explain what that means with examples from real texts. Now let me start off by explaining what narrative perspective is. It's essentially the viewpoint from which your story is told. The most common perspectives are first person, where the narrator uses I and tells the story from their own point of view, and third person, where the narrator uses he, she, or they and tells the story about other characters. In this video, I'll go through some examples of distinctive and original first person narrative. Now here's the thing, just choosing first person or third person isn't going to be enough to hit that distinctive and original descriptor. What the mark scheme is looking for is something more interesting than just I walked down the street or they walked down the street. It wants you to establish a narrative perspective that feels unique, purposeful and engaging. So what makes a narrative perspective distinctive? It's about creating a clear voice, a specific way of seeing the world that comes through in your writing. It's about making deliberate choices that shape how your reader experiences the story. So let me show you some examples from real published fiction where the narrative perspective is immediately distinctive. Example 1 comes from Mark Haddon's The Curious Incident of the Dog in the Night Time, and it starts like this. It was 7 minutes after midnight. The dog was lying on the grass in the middle of the lawn in front of Mrs. Shears's house. Its eyes were closed. It looked as if it was running on its side, the way dogs run when they think they're chasing a cat in a dream. But the dog was not running or asleep. The dog was dead. What makes this distinctive? The narrator, Christopher, sees the world in a very precise, logical way. Notice the exact time, 7 minutes after midnight. It's not just after midnight or late that night. Notice how he describes what the dog looked like before telling us it was dead. This perspective is methodical, detailed, factual. There's no emotion in the language, just observation, and that's a distinctive perspective that we see throughout the entire novel, and it shapes everything about how the story is told. Here's example number 2. This is the opening of J.D. Salinger's The Catcher in the Rye. If you really want to hear about it, the first thing you'll probably want to know is where I was born and what my lousy childhood was like and how my parents were occupied and all before they had me and all that David Copperfield kind of crap, but I don't feel like going into it if you want to know the truth. What makes this distinctive? Holden Caulfield's voice is immediately recognisable as cynical, dismissive, conversational. He's talking directly to us if you really want to hear about it, and he's rejecting traditional storytelling conventions. The perspective tells us everything about who this character is before we've even got into the story properly. Just one note though, don't use informal language like this in your writing. And in fact, this was an important point that came up about any story that is written from the perspective of a child. The November 2017 exam report noted that some students chose to write as children, but the difficulty was that that younger narrative voice was simplistic and did not allow them to showcase their narrative skills. Similarly, we need to be cautious about adopting overly informal conversational voices like Holden Caulfield's here, or mimicking even the deliberately simple vocabulary of Christopher in the first example from The Curious Incident of the Dog in the Night Time. We still want to show off an impressive vocabulary used judiciously and compelling use of linguistic devices that the mark scheme's looking for. So whilst you absolutely can create a distinctive first-person voice, make sure it's one that allows you to showcase your full range of writing skills rather than limiting them. Now, this doesn't mean you can't write from a young person's perspective, that you can't create a sarcastic, cynical narrator or even a logical, precise one. You absolutely can. The key is doing it with sophisticated writing. You can have a teenage narrator who's dismissive or cynical, but they need to express that attitude through precise vocabulary, varied sentence structures, skillful linguistic choices, not just through slang or short repetitive sentences. Let's look at a great example of sophisticated writing from a child's perspective, taken from To Kill a Mockingbird from Harper Lee, and here is Scout describing her teacher. Miss Caroline began the day by reading us a story about cats. The cats had long conversations with one another. They wore cunning little clothes and lived in a warm house beneath the kitchen stove. By the time Mrs. Cat called the drugstore for an order of chocolate malted mice, the class was wriggling like a bucket full of Catawba worms. Now, what makes this distinctive? Scout is looking back at her childhood, and the perspective captures both the adult narrator's vocabulary, words like cunning, Catawba worms, and the child's way of seeing things, this elaborate description of the cat story, the vivid comparison to worms. It's observant, it's funny, it gives us a clear sense of who's telling the story. So, what can we learn from these examples? Each narrator has a distinctive way of seeing and describing the world. Christopher notices precise details and states facts without emotion. Holden speaks in a rebellious voice that pushes back against expectations. Scout blends childlike observation with more sophisticated language. So, if you're going to write in the first person, firstly, think about who your narrator is and how they see the world. Are they confident or nervous? Are they cynical or optimistic? Are they observant or oblivious? Are they young? Are they old? These personality traits should influence the language they use and what they notice. Secondly, consider what your narrator would pay attention to. Christopher notices exact times and factual details. Holden notices fakeness and things that irritate him. Scout notices social dynamics and unusual comparisons. Your narrator's focus tells us something about their character. In the exam, you've got limited time, so you can't develop this hugely complex narrative voice like these published authors have across entire novels. You're writing a story opening, but you can make deliberate choices. You can give your first-person narrator a specific attitude or way of speaking. You can choose vocabulary and details that reflect a particular way of seeing the world. The key is making it feel like a deliberate choice. The examiner should be able to tell that you've thought about your narrative perspective, not just defaulted to I went here and did this, or they went there and did that. In the next video, we'll look at distinctive and original examples of third-person narrative perspective writing. So if you found this video useful, please do give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel.